Okie dokie. We will. All right. All right. We will get started for this evening. Is this working? It is working. Let's turn it up more. So we'll get started like we normally do with your TF groups. Some of the things I want to mention for this evening: user sign up, of course, is due. In case you were not aware, next week, so one of the reasons it's good to get these assignments done as quickly as they're due is next week we're going to be building upon the user sign up and we're going to start adding what I've been referring to as persistence. So we're going to start adding a database next week. And so next Thursday's assignment, you'll start using a database and start using that admin console that has been mentioning in GCE. So that's why stay up on the assignments, you'll be fine. If you're falling behind, try to get caught up and back on track. It's going to get more difficult. Monday, we mentioned that there was going to be class on Wednesday, February 22nd. There will, in fact, be no class on February 22nd or that Thursday, the 23rd. Their launch code is going to give everyone that Thursday as a break. So that Thursday will be your only break before Unit 3 starts. So no class February 22nd or 23rd. We'll have class that Monday. No class the rest of the week. We'll start on the next week. That will be the beginning of Unit 3. Now, for Unit 3, and you can discuss this in your groups and think about it, you'll get more information at the end of this week, so end of tomorrow, I believe, on choosing between two tracks. One of those tracks will be C#, and the other track will be JavaScript. And if you have questions about which one might be a better choice for you or which one you prefer, launch code is going to supply some information to help you make that decision. They should have it to you by tomorrow. If not, they should have it to you earliest next week so you can sort of decide which track you would want and based on that feedback. So we are going to have the two tracks, just depending on how many people sign up for which track will depend on how we arrange ourselves in this room. We're still going to be in this room, but there will be two tracks of information being taught each night. You're only required to learn one of those tracks. Not both.
Quick question.
Yes.
The C# stuff, is that done with something like mono, or does it require?
So the question is the C# stuff, can that be done with mono or does it require a Windows machine? I am not 100% on that answer. I'm not 100% on whether or not we will require Windows running Windows, whether it be on a VM or something locally. I will actually be figuring that out this weekend, so I can help people with both Windows and non-Windows machines on how to get C# running locally. So if you're unaware, C# is a language that was created by Microsoft. It's open source now, but its target platform for running our Windows machines or Windows servers. Unlike Python, we've been running. Python can run on almost any platform. C# was designed to run on Windows. So whenever we do go into the C# or build platform, as we refer to it, likely be some sort of Windows machine. But be thinking about that. You'll get more information to help you make a choice between C# and JavaScript, which track you want, by the end of this week. LaunchCode will send you some materials. Just wanted to bring that up so that you're aware that you'll need to fill out a survey that'll say which one you want. The person doing the C#, if it sways you at all, is going to be me. And then the person covering JavaScript will be Reggie. He's over there. If you haven't met him yet, he's nice. He doesn't bite, so that's good.
Are you sure?
I don't get too close, though. So I stay over here. Yeah, so get started with your starter questions. And if you have any questions on the starter question or anything I've mentioned here, put it in the Slack channel, and I will respond to it before we start on the lecture studio in a wee bit. This is also a good time for teaching fellows to grade the assignments. Feel so inclined.
Yes. Yeah. And make sure everything gets where it's supposed to be. Oh, what is the type of variable? Something else. It was a no, I'm a psychologist. But you know, it's a good suggestion. I just heard somebody say it. I don't remember. It is, doesn't look like it's probably a graphic. That's what's on. Since I can go to projects, just access the database. Kind of like a how is this supposed to be? Yeah, I think it's something that's supposed to go, then I can see. So learning around this automated procedure, then you can easier find so exactly. I started hiring last night. Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yes. Because right.
Not too bad. I think so. Yeah. Only 2 bucks. Okay. It's been a while. Oh, yeah. It's been a long time.
I know.
It's difficult to work to like go back. Yeah, that's why have to go, especially like the video. Go through You're talking about the endoscopy videos. Yeah, the endoscopy videos. But even then, like sometimes the endoscopy ones skip like from video to a test and other parts of video. And then I see I'm really like calls, but like yeah, it's like happening. So some sort of documentation reference. You can just say like, and that's where yeah, so and then it's just like what they're saying. Sorry.
Yeah. But this one is
maybe like that.
Okay, so let's go to
So starting with the Python section, right is the star. Multiple number of arguments. Right. So function has giving up arguments. All that. I don't think it's like major. You might not know ahead of time. And that piece, well, both of these are
all this stuff. I don't get it. Right, so,
It's not. It's not.
Wait, this stuff in your head? Variable? Yeah. So, yeah, here's
So I made a new file. So when I selected these, just return a new character. And because I have
Does anyone? What is this?
That is much better. Turn it down. All right, can everyone hear me better than they could earlier?
Also, is every group ready to begin the my had their There are discussions for getting started. No one posted any questions, so I assume that means there's no problems whatsoever. We can actually just get straight to the studio. Not going to do that, actually. So I'm going to cover a little bit of the Python on how it works, the args and kwargs, and shows some more practical-ish examples. The real power in using args and kwargs, so that star args and double star kwargs, sort of how they're referred to. The real power and how those work and when they're used are for things like templating, which I'll cover more in a little bit. But the ability to pass an arbitrary number of arguments and an arbitrary size dictionary is the reason that you can have templates that you can put any amount of data dynamically that you want to. So Python having that feature makes it really easy to implement templates so that you can use them. But to get a better idea of how each one of those work, we're going to start with the star args example. Something that you might actually do if you're going to say you know that you want to have a function that you're going to pass an arbitrary amount of text to, and you want to get back the basically transformed version of that text. So we'll call this function toCamel. So it'll be to make it all camel case, which basically will make all the first letters capitalized, like a camel. You might find in the wild, but you want to be able to have any number of arguments that you could possibly get. That's what the star args. What that means is that you can pass in as many items as you want that are just single variables. Those variables could be anything, but it will go over each one of them that are passed in to the arguments. So I'm going to return the string. How did I do that down? I wrote the code already and then I lost it. Oh, because I didn't write the star arg version. I just wrote the arg version. So for each argument that gets passed in, what we want to do, we'll call this our master string. We're going to take our master string and we're going to add to it the arg, and we're going to make it title case. And then in the end, we will return our master string. One way that we can call this is we can say print toCamel. And I could go and pass in each one of my words arbitrarily. So we'll say the first one. Let's get an idea. So what I'm doing here is I'm passing 5 arguments to my toCamel function, but my toCamel function is only taking 1 argument. And that argument has that special syntax of having the asterisk, star arg, which allows me to pass as many as I want. So then I come over here to my terminal. I'm going to call it args example. And now we can see that it titleized everything that I put in there. It might be a little nicer. So I'm not going to add a space. So call it again. What we see is that all the arguments I passed in and went and made them title case. One of the things that can be sort of advantageous to using something like this is I can go and also pass in a number because I go and cast it within that function. So then now there's a 1 in there that you can see. And it made it a string so that you can see it all at one time. This is a sort of contrived example of how using an arbitrary number of arguments and a function can be useful, because then you can handle all the different types and you just sort of pass it whatever you want, which is how the templates underneath work when you pass them arguments and you pass them dictionaries. So the other way that you can also call this, so I have this, all these sentences up here that I already made, 4 of them. Another way that you can call a function is by using that star argument, which is what we do with those templates that I'm going to show in a bit. But the way that that works is I can then call that toCaml, and I can use the star, which is often referred to as the splat operator, which in this case is going to take my sentences that I have up above, and it's going to do the work of passing each one of those as an individual argument instead of a single list. So if you have a list of arguments and you want to pass each one, you can give the star and then that variable that you have for the list, or you could put the list in there directly and put the star in front of it. And that will pass each item in your list as an individual argument to the function you are calling. So in this case, it will go and pass my first sentence in, comma, my second sentence, comma the third, and then comma the fourth sentence. So now whenever we go over here and we run it, we get one big long string for the 4 sentences that I have, because it went with star sentences, goes and passes those as individual arguments. To see the difference between what happens here, if I just pass sentences as a list, I end up actually printing out a list and not one big string. But because I cast it to a string, this is no longer a list right here as it got printed out. So just so it's more obvious that that is a string, we can print the type of our master string. We can see what we're returning here is a string. Looks like a list, but it is a string because we cast it to a string. Then when we tell it to be individual arguments, we go and we get one big long string that looks like what we wanted. So that is how the star args work. If you're going to make it a parameter, you use star args. You generally iterate over each one of your arguments. When you're going to pass an arbitrary number of arguments from a list, you do star your variable to explode out your arguments to the function you're calling using the splat. So for kwargs, also similar. So we can call this print fruits. But for this one, we can say for key value in kwargs dot iter items is what I want. I think that's what I want. That's what I want. And then what I can do here, I can print out, I'll make a key string, because dictionaries keys can be of most any type. So it may not be a string, I could have an integer for a key. So we'll make it a string first, and then we'll do the same thing for the value. And then we can print And now I can cheat. This is an advantage to using the format. I don't need to do that. Make this a little more readable. We'll call this the dict string. So the way that you would call this, if you're just gonna give it a call and want to print it out. So we'll call this string that we're gonna print out the toPrint one. We'll call print fruits. Actually, it's gonna print the string anyway. So print fruits. This is where you actually pass in your keyword arguments. So I could pass in something. Really, this is a better name for it because it's going to print whatever keyword arguments we choose to give it. So I could do something like this. Put my comma in there. Now I'm passing all of the keyword arguments in. And then over in my terminal, goes and prints those out because it accepts an arbitrary number of keyword arguments, but only keyword arguments. So now I'm passing it a positional argument, not a keyword argument, and it errors out because it takes 0 positional arguments. So when you see errors that mention things like, oh, it takes 2 positional arguments, but you only gave it 1. Python will error whenever it runs when you attempt to call functions without the correct function signature, is what it is called. So in this case, my function does not allow any positional arguments. Positional arguments are those arguments that are not assigned values directly. So this one that I passed in is a positional argument, keyword argument, or a named argument. And then analogous to the star and then the list. So if I want to explode out a dictionary and pass it in as the values, this is done a lot when you have configuration in Python. So you might create a big dictionary of configuration that you're going to pass to something. So you'll create your configuration in some kind of nice dictionary so it's easy to read. And then what you'll go and do is later on, you'll go and call whatever function you're using to. So in this case, we're wanting to print out that dictionary. That's all this function does. So with dictionaries, the way that you explode them out is use the double star, which is reserved for exploding out the dictionary. So now what happens, this is equivalent to saying red equals, and then that list of the 3 fruits. Purple equals list of those. Yellow equals, and then the list of those. So now if I come over here, we can see again, so I have the one I called before with the one that I passed manually, then the other one that I created the dictionary, and then I called the double star kwargs, printed it out. Now you can see that all those values got passed in by doing the double star keyword arguments. And that is also how the templates later on will work. If there are no questions there, I'm going to quickly cover this, what I would consider seemingly magical way of assigning variables with 1 line. If you can't tell by the file name, so I'll get input. And then what seems to happen so this sort of Boolean short circuit assignment sort of the general programming way that it was done. So in the Udacity video, they took the query parameter in and just assigned it in equals and in int n. I'm not a huge fan of doing this because it hides a lot of logic of what's occurring. So if I were to run this as is, ask for a number, give it a 3. I don't print it out, so that's actually terrible for an example. If I give it a number, hit enter, sanitize number is 3. If I don't give it a number, it still seems to do something other than break. And the reason for that is that it's doing what's called short circuiting to the first value, because neither one of those are actually Boolean values. And when you use the and, it will return one of those values. So if I just open a Python terminal here, and I do something like 0 and 2, it will return 0 because 0 evaluates to the Boolean false. So the way that Python works is it short circuits because it knows when it's doing an and, everything in that and condition must be true. As soon as the first thing that's not true, it's just going to return that whenever you're not actually using Boolean values with Boolean operators. So if I do something like this, it returns 2 because a string with a space in it evaluates to true. And in the same way, if I do a Boolean of 2, that is also true. So the way that Python works, whenever you use and you're not using Booleans, but you are using types other than Booleans, it's not going to return true and false. It's going to return whatever value is there. So the reason you can do something such as empty string and int empty string, which would normally error, is because the Boolean evaluation of that first variable is false. So it immediately returns it out of the and. So that's why you can do and then A is an empty string, because int of an empty string breaks because it doesn't know how to interpret that.
Let's see the Boolean value just by doing bool value. Oh, you already got it.
Yeah. Oh, I can't type correctly. So another way to write this that might be a little easier for someone to read coming through is it's doing the equivalent of if num sanitized number is equal to int of that number. So if the number is true, go and take the integer of it, else just assign it whatever was passed in.
So if you did that and gave it ABC, I guess it'll just bring out ABC.
Well, if you give ABC, it'll break in both cases because int of ABC is, it's also another reason it's not a great idea to do the short circuit assignments because they usually don't have enough validation in them to be, and it makes it really hard for people coming in later to your code to know what's happening because not every programming language has the same results when you do short circuit assignment like this. Another reason I don't recommend it, personally. But that is how it works. So if I come over here, We end up getting the same results that we did using the short circuit evaluation. Only this way, it's a little easier for someone to read. If we have a number, make it an integer, else just assign it. Are there any questions on this before we get to the walkthrough? Oh, that works. I will take that as a no questions. All right, no questions it is. We'll go right to the walkthrough. Flick list, get excited. Get to continue working on that flick list all through the walkthroughs and the studios. It sounded like everyone was really happy to do it. So keep up that energy for the flick list. Whole purpose of the walkthrough tonight is to make the templates a wee bit easier to get used to, because it is a big conceptual shift from what we've been doing with just concatenating strings together. However, templates make it much easier to do web development than concatenating strings. They make it a lot easier. So the first thing we need to do is we know the templates that we're using are Jinja templates. So in magical Google App Engine land, you come over here and you create inside your YAML file. You don't really need to worry about necessarily how the syntax of all this works inside YAML files. YAML files have their own special way that they interpret things. You don't need to care. All you need to know is that we add a Jinja2 dependency, and we like to be really risky and always get the latest version. Much like software or hardware you might have at home for cable or anything else, it's a rare day that you'll develop an application and define latest for all your dependencies. So in professional development, much like this version right here says 2.5.2, you would provide an actual version here and not just say latest, because latest says go and get whoever the developer is that makes Jinja2, just get whatever they just published as their latest version, which will most certainly break your application after 6 months to a year of running. So don't follow the practice of always getting the latest. For what we're doing right now, it is fine, but if you go to make an actual website in production, running it, never always grab the latest dependencies. So now we have Jinja2 and that latest there. We can go on over to our Google App Engine. If I have my cursor on the right screen, I'll go and slide Google App Engine over here so it's a little easier. And our browser. So flick list, I have it currently running. So if I come over here to flick list, go to my correct port and run it. Flick list is running, still good. Means the dependency addition worked. Well, it means at least it didn't break there. Next thing to do is we go and modify main.py. And we know that we're going to start using the Jinja2 library. And later on, we'll also use OS. I don't have to remember to scroll at the top and use it. But we'll use Jinja2 eventually. Now what we can do over here is refresh. The fact that the web page did not explode means that it correctly imported that library. We can verify that by typing some nonsense after the library name. And then it complains about not working and it's broken. So then you can come over here. Anytime your app seems like it should be running, but it's not, you can come over to your Google App Engine launcher, go to the whichever app you're currently running, click on logs, and then it opens up the log console, which here states that import error, no module name, Jinja2 nonsense characters. So then I can go and change this back to just be Jinja2, refresh the page, and the app is working again. So the first series of things that we want to do is set up our Jinja template, what are called Jinja templates. So the way that we do that, we'll ignore all of what we have there. We'll go in here and we will set up Jinja. So what we set up is we want to do that. This will be sort of code that you just kind of copy most of the time. Anytime you use it, usually copy it from somewhere else that you previously did it, or you Google search it. Some people remember it, I never do. But this code is that you know you want to go to a new directory where you're going to store all your templates. So we're going to create a directory called templates. Right now, we have no templates, but we know that's where the templates are going to be. So then within our Python code, we need a programmatic way to get those templates. And the reason that we're going to use something that's a little more complicated with OS path and join and putting it all together is because if you were to go and deploy your application to some other web server, be it on Amazon, something Microsoft's running, something Google's running, or something you run in your closet, that's going to be different than where it's at on your computer. So it needs to be able to dynamically determine where it's at on that computer's file system. And the way to do that in Python is this. So this os.path.join, all this does is take whatever list of arguments you pass it. So this is another function that takes an arbitrary number of arguments, and it goes and joins them together, giving them the correct directory notation for the operating system it's running on. So on a Windows machine, you get backslashes, and on a Mac machine, you get forward slashes, or whichever one they're referred to. You get different facing slashes depending on which computer you're running on, which is why you run this os.path.join. The next thing you want to do is then get your current directory. It's more common for someone in their code to do something like this to represent their current directory. So you'd say os.path.dir name. So this is going to return the directory name. And in Python, whenever you're executing a file, so this even mentions it here, a little nice little helper that my computer has for me, is it is a representation of the current file, which is going to be its location. And this os.path.dir name gets the directory that that file is in. So what it's going to do when it runs is it's going to get whatever directory main.py is in. And the template directory we know is one directory below that. So then what we can do is right here is we can pass in the current directory, and then we know the next directory where our templates are going to be is in this templates folder. So current directory and then templates. And it's going to look there for all the templates anytime you tell it to make use of a template later in the code. So then we set up the actual Jinja environment templates, set those up. And this, so this Jinja environment so this loader argument takes what is referred to in Jinja as to set up Jinja. So we're going to say, all right, we want to load all of our templates. So Jinja has various different ways to load templates. The one we're going to use is to load them from the file system. So we're going to use what's called a file system loader. And the file system loader takes the one argument, and that argument is where it's going to find the templates that's going to use later. So we'll go and tell it, all right, we're going to create this loader. All the loader does is it knows where and how to find files. So we go and we create that in a variable. And the next thing that we do is we want to set up the Jinja environment, which is what we'll use later to go and actually compile templates and pass them variables, as well as tell it which template we want, which is why we then say, all right, we're going to create a Jinja environment, and the loader I want to use for this Jinja environment is the file system loader. So now anywhere later on where we're going to use the Jinja templates, we'll go and just use those files automatically. So the first thing we will want to do is actually go and use that template. So sort of set up our templates. So the first thing we will do for our main.py is set it up to use what would be an edit template, which right now, because we call it edit header, this is the first page where you go and you modify your watch list. So we can refresh. We're still working. It means none of our Python code is busted so far. First thing we're going to do is make our get function. We're just going to delete everything that's in here. Just throw it all in the trash can. And we are going to use a terrible variable name called t for our templates. And we're going to tell it to use a template that we're going to call edit.html. And then from there, we will call this our content. And then we will render our template. And like we were doing before, put out the content. So this is something that's actually pretty nice whenever it comes to starting to use templates. Makes it a lot easier. Oh, that's a lie. Makes it a lot easier to write code. Makes it easier to read. So we know, all right, all we're going to do is we're going to render this template. So we come over here, and I refresh the page, and it broke, but it gives me a nice little error message. Scroll on down past all the gobbledygook, and right here, at the very bottom, you'll see it says template not found, edit.html. What that means is we gave it a template name, right here, edit.html, and it can't find it in that template directory. And that is because we never created the file.
Can you have templates in multiple locations?
So the question is can you have templates in multiple locations? The answer to that is yes. That is why Jinja allows you to. So we configured it up here, and we said that this Jinja env is going to find its templates from this file system loader, which is going to find its files inside the template directory that we defined. You could define multiples of those, and you could use different Jinja envs, different variables that you go and create, as many times as you wanted throughout. It's usually convention that all of your templates would be in one area if you're building sort of a small, simple app like this. Other frameworks do different locations of where templates are. For the most part, you would do something akin to tell it where your templates are located, and then you put all your templates in that spot. You can create nested directories in there because it will go and attempt to find the files that are further down. And that's where you would use the os.path.join on those files if you go and create directories. But for what we're doing, we'll put them all in the same directory so it's easier to see them all, be able to use them. So first thing we need to do is right here, create this new file, edit.html, just to know that we have one now. You can go and refresh, and there we go. We know that our edit.html is working. Now I'm going to cheat. And I'm going to change edit.html to have what we had before. What's nice now is in my editor, I get syntax highlighting. And I have my title that we had before, but now it's just in this file, a little easier to reason with and use. Then I have my form, the first form, which lets you add individual movies. Then I have my second form, which also then allows you to do the crossing off. There's nothing dynamic in that first form, because all it is a text field that asks you to add something. Now the next form is the form that will have the dynamic pieces. So before we were iterating over our watch list and then concatenating all our options together. Within the template, we can actually use a for loop using the syntax of the Jinja templating engine, which is if you're going to have what's called an expression, you give it a multi-line expression, which in this case is going to be the for loop, and then you have to tell it to end. You need to use the percent signs so that it knows that there's going to be something in the middle. So in this case, there's going to be the option with stuff in it in the middle. Now for value equals, and then in between that option right here, the option tag, which is then going to display, it will display the movie, and the value that gets submitted, remember you submit the form, is also going to be the movie. It will be the same. It's the same thing we did when we concatenated the strings together. The advantage here is you can see it more easily in the HTML, how it's all going to lay out whenever the HTML actually goes to render. The double brackets on both sides here tell it to evaluate a single expression right here. So the expression here that it's evaluating is just this variable to its string value. And also down at the bottom, we do the same thing with the error like we did before. If there's an error, we go and we display it by putting the text inside of that P tag. So now if I go here and I refresh the page, we get our form, but there's absolutely nothing in it. And the reason that there's nothing in it is we still haven't actually provided it any data. So inside main.py, we're doing what we want, but we're not actually passing any arguments to render. We know that we have a watch list that we want to pass in. Let's see what happens with watch list. All right, so now that's filling out as we expect it to. So there's only one item in that list, it fills out, and it iterates over each item in the list and then fills out our option form. The watch list is the keyword argument that we're passing to the render of our template. So first we go and we get the template using that Jinja env. So now we have a template object. On that template object is a method called render. Now what you do when you call render is you pass it all the named arguments with their values that you want to actually show up inside of your template or be used within your template. So in our case, we're passing in the watch list, which coincides here. And this for loop works the exact same as a for loop does within the Python code. So we say, all right, for each movie, which this is then declaring a variable that only exists inside this template. Movie is only declared within this block here. So for each movie, in that list that I passed in, we go and create the option statement. And we have the movie for the value and the movie for what's getting displayed. Go down to the bottom, we still haven't passed in an error. So if we wanted to, we can say error equals some error, but then that's hard-coded, and we're always going to have an error there. If you notice, we also don't have any styling currently. And we know we want to share the styling across pages. We will get back to that. What we need to do for just this page still is use a dynamic list. Because we know that we want to get whatever the current watch list is for the person. So we can create a function for the current watch list. And we'll call it. And we'll want to pass that watch list into our variable. So now when we go over to this page, so same as before, that same get current watch list. Come over here. Now we have all those values inside of the current watch list. So I can go here, cross it off. That still works exactly as it did before. Now the error isn't quite doing what we wanted it to do because this value is not dynamic. But what we were doing before is we were just grabbing error off of the URL parameter. So what we can do is exactly that. Self.request, like we did before. Get, and we can get the error. Now if I refresh this page, looks as we want it to, and if we were to redirect back at some point, go and it would request and it will actually show it whenever it puts the error in the URL parameter. That's also something else you can do. You don't always have to submit your form if you're reading URL parameters. You can just go and modify them in the URL and hit enter and see the results immediately. But we will remove that. Something that we're missing here, we go and inspect the page. So it appears that we have HTML, but we really don't. Because if I actually go in here and I view the page source, all we actually have is the H3 header, the form, and the other form. It's not quite a proper HTML document. We don't have the doc type. We don't have it wrapped in HTML tags. It's not inside the body. We don't have a head declare. We don't have a title for our page. None of that is here. So what we can do is we can create what is often referred to as a base template. So much like our classes can inherit from other classes and get that behavior, we can do the same thing with templates. So here I can go and create a base.html, which will always want the doc type for the first thing. We'll want an HTML, have the head. Usually want a title. We'll just say all of our pages are called flick list. And then here is where we can start to use styles across all of our pages and not have to hard code them on each one. So we have that error class. So if we have an error on any page, we can now, within here, go and create that error class and then just say that the color is red. Close off the head, and we go and create a body. We know we want to close that body, and we also want to close the HTML. So what we have here is the basis of what will be our HTML page. Something you likely want to do is you'll want to create a heading that will sort of be the same on all your pages. We want users to easily be able to always navigate back to the main page of an application. You usually include this link inside of your base template. So in this case, now every page that inherits from this base template will now have that flick list content with the link at the top. The bit that makes this work and how the inheritance works is by declaring what are called blocks. When you create blocks, other templates can then inherit from this one and replace each one of those blocks on their own. So you can have different blocks. If so, say you were creating a news site, you likely would want something that's like your main content, and then you might have another block that you called add content, where all your ads would go for the page. So that each person can decide what all they're going to fill out. So if you don't want ads on your article, you just don't put any ads in your ad content on your template. But for our first one, we're just going to only have content. Only one block. You can have as many blocks as you want in your templates. So now we have our base template defined. We'll come over here. Everything looks the same. We don't have that title on this page. We don't have anything yet still. And that's because we haven't done anything yet. Some other styles I'll add on here so it's a little easier to see. Zero auto will center the content on the page, and that 980 will make it be a standard width on the screen. Refresh, that still didn't happen because we haven't inherited from the template yet. So what we'll want to do is in our edit template, we'll want to make sure that we inherit from that base template. You are encouraged to be potentially following along on your computer. So we'll use extends, which is the keyword to tell it that you want to inherit from something. And in this case, we want to extend base.html. So we come here. Now we can see that we have some content. We have the title, but we don't have anything on our page anymore. And the reason for this is we haven't filled out that content block. So in our base, we went and created this block that we called content. When you inherit from a template, nothing gets displayed that is outside of a block that you declared in the parent template. So you have to override the blocks in the template that is extending in order to actually have content appear on the screen.
Can you go over that one more time?
All right. So right now, if I come over here, We can tell that we're successfully extending the base template because we have the flick list title. So we have the flick list title here that exists right here. So if I go and I split this open, that is the HTML I'm supposed to have. You can tell this is the HTML from the base template right here. What's missing is all this other HTML I made. All this other HTML is missing because we haven't overridden that block that we called content. And the way that the template inheritance works is you say, all right, I'm the edit.html template. I want to extend this base template. What that says is edit will have everything that the base HTML template has. And it does, as we can see, have everything that the base.html template has. However, we don't see any of the content we typed. We don't see any of the text or HTML that we typed into this page. The reason for that is when you inherit from a template, you only display what the parent template allows you to display. So much like a class inheritance, the parent is controlling the behavior of your what would be child template here. So edit is a child of the base template. So what we see over here is the missing HTML, that missing form. We want to display that missing form. The only way we can do that in the templates that do extend, so any template that extends can only have its content displayed if it fills out a block from the parent template it is extending from. So in this case, the edit template will only be able to show all of this content if it puts it inside of a block from the base HTML template. And the base HTML template here has one block, and that block is called content. So we need to fill out that content block within our edit.html in order to see anything.
So if I had another block on that page with a different name, would it show or not?
Was if I had another block on this page with a different name, would it show?
No, on the edit.
No. Because there's no spot for it to exist. I think. Oh, that's fine. Apparently I revoked its permission. Yeah. That's fine. So the way this works for the templates is this template here is base.html. And within base.html, we've gone and created one overridable content area. That we have called content. we happen to have some bonus text within our template here. That just says flick list, just the title link. So we have our little title, and then we have our content. So the way that our inheriting template works, so now over here, what we're doing with our other template, make this a little smaller. So this is our base.html, and this will be our edit. And right now, with what we have declared, because we haven't overridden that content block, this is all we're going to see. This is what edit.html looks like to Ginger right now. Even though we filled out text in there, Ginger doesn't see it because we have not informed it where that text should live. And the only oh, that's better. Let's make that. So between the two, we have base.html. So the orange is representing what is going to be in every template because it's what is hand-coded into the base template. This oval is the content that can be overridden. It's what that block, content, and then end block has. Now edit extended base.html. But right now, if we go over and look at our edit page, it looks exactly like this. It's just showing that flick list title link. And the reason it's only showing that flick list title link is because we haven't told the template where its content is at. We've put stuff in the template, but it's not going to render anything because we haven't told it where to find it. So the way Ginger works is it only knows where to grab the text from when you use the extends if you tell it where that text is supposed to go. So right now we have one overridable spot, and it is called content. What we need to do then is in our edit template that is extending it is we need to also provide it a block of content. And the way that we do that is the exact same way of what we see here. You can actually copy this out of your base.html, a content block, and then in your edit block, you can misspell the word overridden and put it on here. Well, I think that's spelled correctly. So now, when we come over here, what we will see is that we now have that overridden content. Because what we did was we told it that we have content, and we went and provided it with some override values. So now we have override values that are appearing on our page see it, my overridden content, because we went and defined that content block. So that content block must be defined in the child template, so in this case, edit.html, in order for it to display at all because it's extending the base.html template.
I assume probably something based on HTML block, content block.
So the question is, can I assume that if something is in the block content on the base, that it will be overridden? And the answer to that is yes. So if we come over here, we refresh, we overrode it. However, if we do go to edit and we remove our overriding of that content block, when we refresh, you can have default values in each piece of that content in your parent. Because all you're doing with your child template that is extending it is just overriding what's there. And what is there by default when you don't put anything in it is just white space. So much like this diagram shows is base.html has content, as does flick list. It just so happens that content was an empty string by default. And you can override it in each one of those templates. But because you are extending base.html, any template that extends base.html must follow this flow. It must fill out a block that is called content to display anything at all. If it doesn't, as we saw, it won't display anything. What we really want to do here is we want to display our form. So we can do block content and then all the way down at the bottom, go and add that end block. And then boom, we now have this working exactly as it was before. There's a little error when we pass it in. Come back here, form still works, sends us to the cross-off page. So what we'll also want to do is on that cross-off page, we will want to do the same thing that we just did with edit with the cross-off example. So we can come on down to our cross-off handler. And begin to make those changes. So where we start to build all this HTML, we can just go ahead and say we don't care. So right here, we're going to want to render the Ginger template. So like we did before, we're going to create our template. It'll be the Ginger env, that variable we created above, that houses all of our ability to create, modify the Ginger templates that we want to render. We always call .get template in order to get the template that we want to change. So we'll want to have a cross-off template so that it corresponds with our cross-off handler. Then we will render said template like we did before, and then we will put the content out. So now we can come here and we can cross it off, and we'll see that same error we saw before because we haven't created the template yet. So much like we did before, we're going to go and create our cross-off.html template. And we know we want to extend our base, and we're going to want some kind of content. Now we come back over here, we refresh. We now have a flick list with nothing showing because we haven't passed anything to our template yet. Now we know we want some kind of HTML in here. And if you recall, that HTML was a paragraph. And we struck out the variable that we were given. So we know that we're wanting to strike out a variable that happens. So we do the little double curly braces. And then whatever we're going to go and call that variable, which we will call cross off movie. And that message we had before, which is has been crossed off your watch list. And then close our p tag. Now if we come here, we're almost there. We have the text showing up, but we haven't actually put the variable in there yet. So what we want to do is in main.py is make sure our variable name matches. So we called it cross off movie. And do cross off movie equals the crossed off movie that they give us. Notice this still has the same error handling we had before. So it goes through and it checks the current watch list. If it's not in there, if it's not in the watch list, then we go and redirect to that main page with an error, just like we did before. But now what we're doing is instead of building HTML inside of here, we now have that HTML available to us because of the template. So now if I refresh, now we can see that value I originally selected is now crossed out via that template. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the studio?
Just defining, you're defining the block or the template in the get or the post part, and then you're, then when you use the block element, you're saying that's what you're calling the template. The block and the block.
Right, so I think, correct me if I'm not phrasing or summarizing this question correctly. The question is, whenever you're doing the get or the post, that being these methods here, so this post or this other one up here where we're doing the get.
How are they talking to each other?
The question is, how are they talking to each other to render those templates? And the sort of the way that the templates work is it's not so much that the get and the post are talking to each other at all. All that templates do is create a big string for you in Python. And all that's happening is we're doing exactly what we did before. We're just doing response.write big string. The templates make creating that string easier so that you're not having to concatenate a bunch of other strings together. The way that the get and post communicate with each other are based on the HTML that we created. So right here, the reason that this works is because we have a form action that goes to cross off that has a post method, which we have wired up inside of main.py down at the bottom to say that if you go to a URL /crossoff, we will go to our crossoff movie handler, and we have a post method in here that App Engine automatically, well, Web App 2 automatically wires up for you so that if a post HTTP request is made to that URL, it will attempt to use the post URL route. So it'll use that method, and then it comes in here, and in the same way, the reason the post is able to show that change here, the my favorite Martian crossed out, is because all we've done with these templates is we've just made an easier way to create those strings. So this t.render call is what goes and creates your string. And we're doing exactly what we were doing before. We're taking the string that we want to show the user and we're writing it out to the response. So self.response.write, big string just like we were before. The difference now is that the way we're generating that string is we're using templates. So there is no difference in this implementation and what we have been doing on how the get and the posts work. They continue to work how they always have. The difference between them now is that we're using templates to create those strings so that it is easier to make large strings. So the goal for the studio tonight is, if you notice, I did not do anything for the add route. Your goal will be to have an add movie request handler that then also uses a template. So that will, implementing that portion is your objective for this evening. With the studio, I recommend going to the URL where the studio is and reading it to implement it. And if you are a teaching fellow, you should wander up to this corner before we get started on the studio so we can chat, high five, dance a little.
It's really important to work together on this one. So find somebody to work with for a couple weeks.
But make sure you're working together in your groups and you're not just sitting in a corner by yourself.
Oh, and there's also this room over here. I probably emphasized that enough, but if you find it hard to work up here, there's over here. There's a table and some chairs.
But if you're a teaching fellow, you should come up to the corner over here. Come on over. Is the mic still on? Let me mute the video mic. That are going to work a little faster than usual to show a solution to the studio so that you can see the solution before we head out tonight in 13 minutes. I could do the clapping thing that one of the other instructors does, but I think that's condescending. Well, I'm going to try to walk through quickly but coherently a solution to the studio. The goal of the studio is that the add movie works using a template, and we can show that confirmation message using a template the same way the other ones have been using one. So if we go to our flick list right now, I've gone and I've checked out the Studio 4. I have that code. So now if I go back to that base URL, I come in here and I add my new movie, I get the under construction message that all of you would have gotten. So we know the first thing we need to do is we're going to need to add a template. So at the very least, we know we want to add a new template because we're going to be using a template. So we're going to add a template file here. We'll make it the add confirmation.html template, because that's what it is when someone adds a movie. We're confirming that they added it correctly, so we'll call this add confirmation. This template, much like the other one, we are going to make this inherit from the base template that we have. What we're doing by default here is we're saying, all right, the add confirmation.html is going to extend the base template the same way that all of our other templates have. What we want to do, so we have our add confirmation template. We want to wire this template and start using it. So we'll use this the same way we have in all the other ones. So I'll come down here and I'm going to copy this code. And I will paste it. What I need to change here is the template that we're going to use. We're going to use the add confirmation.html. We don't currently have any arguments to pass it, so we will delete that. And then finally, what we want to do is, just like all the other times we've been using the template, we want to take the content of that template and we want to write it out. So we're going to go and get the template and we're going to render it. The render function just returns a string, which is content, and then we want to write out. We can even just call this our HTML text. So we're going to take the HTML text that is returned from render. We're going to write that out. So now if we come over here and we call add again, we don't have anything, but we can tell we're properly extending that base.html because we have that title, that flick list title that is in the base.html file. Base.html, as we saw, still has flick list there with that block content. We haven't filled out block content yet. So in order for anything to show up, we have to go and fill out block content. And we end that block. Now if I come over here, do a refresh, which does a re-add, we can see now that we're filling out that block of content. Now we have text in that block. It's not dynamic because we've hard-coded it into the template, but it's at least some text. We know our template is wired up correctly, and now we can start putting dynamic content into it. What we know we want to put in there is what we had before. So before, what we had was we had a paragraph, and within that paragraph, we had a bold movie, and then we said, has been added to your watch list. We were really excited, so we gave an exclamation point this time. Now we want to insert a variable here, like we did on the other pages. And the way that you insert the variables into the templates is you use that double curly bracket or curly brace, and you put the name of your variable in there. And we have strong, and we have a movie that we want to pass in. So now if we come here, we do a refresh, we now have has been added to your watch list. So we know the template is still updating, still wired up correctly, but we have not passed in our dynamic content yet. So what we still need to do is inside of our main.py, inside of our add movie, inside this post, we have the new movie that was added. We need to take that new movie and have it get rendered out. And much like we did in the other methods, so in the get, we went and pulled in the error that they pass in the get URL, and we also pass in our generated watch list. In the cross-off movie, we go and we get their crossed-off movie that they pass in, and we go and we render that. That same idea, what we're going to do is they passed in movie, we do some validation. If the movie isn't properly filled out, we still redirect with an error, like we have been doing. If the movie is one of the terrible movies, we redirect with an error. And then finally, if we get to line 56, that means the proposed movie has passed validation and it's okay to add to the watch list. So we escape it here, so that when we go to render it to the browser, we're not allowing arbitrary HTML to be rendered. Now, if you recall from the videos for the class, they mentioned that you can use an auto escape equals true in your Jinja configuration. That configuration being up here, when you go and define your Jinja env, you can also define that you want it to auto escape. Auto escape will, for every variable that you put in your template, it will automatically make it have the HTML entities, which are the ampersand, LT, semicolon for less than. Same idea for greater than. It will automatically escape all those values for you. So what you would normally do anytime you're using a templating engine is you would take advantage of that and you would do the auto escape equals true. And that basically ensures every value that you render out is safely encoded so that the user never has JavaScript inserted to their page that you didn't say was okay. And by doing that, we actually no longer need the CGI. So now anywhere we're using that .cgi, we can safely ignore it because our templates are auto-escaped. So then here, We no longer need to do that, and we can actually just pass our movie. So back to our template. We know that we want to pass in that dynamic movie value that we put in the template, which was movie. So now I want to say movie is equal to the new movie they added. So new movie's in there. Now I can come in here and do hard. I can go and say, I can add this, and it will actually go and show all those values as they were. And if we go and inspect, and we view the page source, we can see that all those values inside the strong tags that we made in our template, they're automatically escaped because we passed that auto escape equals true whenever we defined our Jinja template. So the Jinja M, that variable is how you access all of your templates. And when you go to create that environment, what it calls environment, which is just where all your templates are, you can pass in that keyword argument, auto escape equals true, and then all of the templates you have later automatically escape any HTML that is inside of text that gets put into your template. If you want to then say that it's okay for someone to do something, you use this pipe and you would say safe. And that's a built-in template function inside of Jinja that you could use if you wanted to do it. For what we're doing though, you likely want to auto escape anything you're putting in there and not mark it safe ever, because you're getting user input. User input by definition is never safe. So auto escaping means your templates are easier to read and you don't have to worry about calling CGI.escape on everything that you use. The unfortunate caveat is that all of your studios and walkthroughs do not do this correctly. So remember that when you're working through them, you want to use auto escape equals true whenever you go and create your Jinja template environment. Studio does not do that, but that does not mean that it's a practice to follow. Any framework that you use, be it this web app 2 or other frameworks and other languages for web development, you will almost always have auto escape true by default. So you don't end up accidentally having malicious input revealed to your user by accident. Are there any questions? You have negative like 20 seconds. Do feel free to ask a question now though if you do have one, if any of this isn't clear. All right, everyone go home and have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl if you choose to watch it. If you choose to watch the Puppy Bowl, which is a more enjoyable experience, it's on Animal Planet, you should definitely watch that. They have the Kitty halftime show. It's a great time. Yes. Well, you can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here. I was advised to play Closing Time by Semisonic, but I've chosen not to.